So 4 years ago, dementia was ranked as the fourth most debilitating cause of disease and injury burden in Australia. In 2017, nationwide, dementia was the second leading cause of death. Since 2003, the disability burden of dementia has risen by almost 57%, so it's the fastest growing disability we have in this nation. By the time a person has a dementia diagnosis, there's precious little we can do about it as clinicians. It isn't reversible, it's incurable, and while our current healthcare model is really enthusiastic about medicating end-stage neurological dysfunction, call me crazy, I've been called worse, I advocate for preventive, subtle lifestyle modifications. In my little pocket of Australia, it's startling to be approached by a growing number of people under the age of 40 who are coming to me because they have early symptoms of neurodegeneration. As the saying goes, I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. So, stress in the brain. Let's differentiate between acute stress and chronic stress. Every living system grows and benefits from moderate acute stress. For example, when we go to the gym, we apply a measured amount of stress, mechanical stress, to skeletal muscle, and then we recover, and the muscle grows during that recovery period if it's nourished with the right nutrients and good sleep. This is great. Small amounts of stress build resilience and endogenously enhance our body's adaptive capacity to adapt to stress. It would be nonsensical to train skeletal muscle over and over and over again and expect that muscle to grow in the absence of this recovery period. Well, the same concept applies to your greatest and biggest muscle, your brain. When applying psychological or physiological stress ad nauseum and not giving your brain any recovery period, you're creating an inflammatory environment where the brain will break down, it will atrophy, it will get smaller, and your neurons are going to up sticks, slow down, and degenerate. Here are some real-world examples of chronic long-term psychological stress. Feeling like you have too much work to do and aren't coping with the load. Not having enough time for yourself to pursue creative endeavours. Inadequate sleep. Feeling trapped in toxic relationships with your peers or your partner. Hating your job and not enjoying things that used to bring you great pleasure. Things like art and music and food. Chronic physiological stressors, they manifest in chronic pain, blood sugar instability, dysglycemia, environmental toxins, having chronic and recurrent infections you just can't shake, autoimmune attacks, and systemic inflammation. Our imaginary friend here, Brenda, okay, she's 34. She loathes her job, she can't get quality sleep, and she's beset by anxiety in the middle of the night when she wakes up and realises she might miss a deadline for work. And she has chronic lower back pain. Statistically, lower back pain is likely as it's the second leading cause of disability in Australia. Brenda's state of chronic stress is usually shown in her blood chemistry. Her cortisol levels and her interleukin-6 are off the map. These inflammatory markers, cortisol and IL-6, when these are elevated over protracted periods, the first organ to really get affected is Brenda's master control system, her brain. Now, the hippocampus is rich in cortisol receptor sites. The hippocampus, as a result of this elevated cortisol, it degenerates the fastest. Brenda will start to lose aspects of her declarative memory, so she'll forget what the capital of Australia is or what she had for dinner 3 nights ago. She'll lose visuospatial processing capacity. She'll trip over objects more easily. Brenda's blood-brain barrier permeability will break down. She'll become more susceptible to neuroinflammation and neuroautoimmunity. So her brain can't keep pathogens outside of her central nervous system, leading to all sorts of chronic diseases, incurable diseases. Lastly, Brenda's entire brain will atrophy. It will legitimately shrink as these inflammatory compounds that are circulating around starve her brain of nutrients. So stress has the same effect on the brain that immobilizing a limb does. The brain will shrink because it's not receiving the right ratio of oxygen, nutrients, and stimulation. A brain that's in this catabolic state is on a fast track to dementia. The good news is, switching trains and getting off the Dementia Express is fairly simple. All you need are two things: a pen and a piece of paper. What I like to do is set a worry schedule. So I use 5 minutes per day. That's my worry time. I set it at 5 p.m. and I allot 5 minutes. You'd be surprised how setting a worry alarm for 5 minutes once per day liberates you from the rest of the day. And when a worrying thought creeps in, I can check my watch and say, wait a minute, it's not 5 o'clock yet. I don't have to worry about that yet. So invariably at 5 p.m., that thing that I was stressed about, I'm not stressed about it anymore. The other thing that's really useful to do is set time aside on paper in your diary. So diarise for 1 day a week where you go off grid. You make zero plans, zero commitments with friends. That time is for you. It doesn't have to be 1 day, it can be a half a day as your schedule allows. Personally, I turn off my Wi-Fi. I put all of my electrical devices in the bottom cupboard of my laundry, and I just read books, I create some art, and basically that resets me. And during the week, as I'm dealing with, work stresses and family stresses and things like that, my brain knows that it has in its arsenal a period of time that week where it is committed to nothing. Ironically, what one has to do when one goes off grid to get the best benefit from it is to tell your friends and family that you're going off grid. Okay, so don't worry them. Be proactive and say, hey, listen, I'm taking some time for myself. And that is a neurostrength tip, because, reducing your amount of neuroinflammation, invariably your best course of action is to minimize stress. Thank you.